Alright, welcome back to another video where I show you how to create modern websites using HTML5, CSS3, and a little bit of JavaScript. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I set up an application, a news application that I made. It's called Skimmer, skmmr, and you can find that application at skimmer, skmmr.news. So it's not a .com, it's a .news. And what it is, it's a website that pulls in news articles using something called the News API, which is a free to use API as long as you're not using it for commercial purposes, which Skimmer is not for commercial purposes. You can see it here. So it's pulling in these different articles from sources all over the web. So you can see there's a top stories, or you can choose the latest stories, which is all the stories that are being published from that particular that particular news source. For this one, the default is Reuters, but you can see here that you can choose from all types of different news sources from around the world. So it's pretty cool, and what happens is, if you click on a news source, it goes out and it brings in the top stories from that particular news source. You can go through, if you want to read the actual story, then you can go to the website. You can see how weird it is to load everything. That's one of the reasons I created it, was so that there would be sort of this meta layer between you and the actual news story, so you could choose, do I really want to do I really want to go in and read the whole story, or is this just enough for me? For me, I built this basically for me so that I could skim the news. I don't like to do a lot of deep dives into the news. I like to do more of a Twitter style, where I go into the news a little bit at a time, many times a day. So this feed updates every 15 minutes or so. So when you come back, all you do is, you refresh the page and you'll get new stories. Or if you want to do a deeper dive, there's also a search, like a really deep search that searches tens of thousands of websites and blogs. So you can check out the actual application. It looks great on a mobile phone. And lots of people use it on the desktop too. It's a web app, so there's no need to download anything, but it's going to look and sort of behave like an application. You can add it to your home screen, etc. But at the core of it, it's using this news API, and essentially it's just going out and making calls every time that you refresh the page. It's going out and making a call, either to get everything or to get the top headlines. So there are lots of different things, and then it brings back this source code, and then we roll through this source code and output it to the screen. So it's very similar to the sort of things that we've been doing in the API videos. It has great documentation, so it's super easy to figure out how to get everything. And then it shows you some of the news sources that are available. So you can see that you can get all these different news sources. You can get news by category. So there's a lot of interesting things that you would be able to do to just sort of bring this news into your application or into your website. So the first thing I want to do is just show you my basic HTML setup. So I have a main container. This is where we're going to output our articles, and I have sort of a sample article here just so I can use that HTML to set up the JavaScript that's going to build it into this main article. So basically every time we get a story or an article, we're going to go through and we're going to get the description, which is the summary. We're going to get the URL, and we're going to get the URL to the image, and then we're going to put those into the right places here, and then we're going to output this entire article one after another. So for each time there is an article, we'll output the article. So this is almost exactly what we've been doing in some of the other working with API videos, where I showed you how to use Unsplash. This is just a different API, but the mechanics are almost entirely the same. I'm not going to go through all of the machinations of of how I actually did all the different parts of Skimmer. I've built some pieces of code that are just you can build a feed and combine feeds together and different stuff like that and output them to the screen. So I'm not going to go through all that, but I will show you just generally how to go out and get some news. So the first thing that we're going to do is do a get JSON. Sorry. And this is a jQuery. So if you don't want to do jQuery, you can look up how to get and parse JSON using JavaScript. But this is a super easy function that we have, a method that we have in order to do a bunch of things. But I can just say get JSON, and it takes two values. And the first one is the URL of the API, and then we can include a function. A callback function. So we're just going to put data in here, and then we're going to console log the data that comes back. Now we need to decide what part of the API, what node do we want to hit. We have a few endpoints here. We have the sources, which goes back and it just literally gets all of the sources that are available. We have everything, which gets all of the news based on particular queries. And then we have the top headlines. The top headlines are only sort of featured stories that are marked that these are the top headlines of the day. So let's just work with this one, and you can see here that if you wanted to get the top headlines in the United States, that would be a way to do it. What I'm going to do is just copy this part here. I'm just going to copy this and then take out what we don't need. So let's take out the country part. And then, so now we're getting the top headlines from the news API. We need to replace our key here. And let's do that this way. So K is for key. And then we're console logging this data. So it should come back to us as what we need. Let's do one more. Okay. We're breaking in right here, but this this mark goes with this mark. Okay, so all of this needs to be inside of a quotation marks. So this is all inside quotation marks, but we're breaking into that string here, and then we're adding our variable here. So you can see that we are going to get the JSON data from this URL. We're adding the API key, and then after that we're going to have a function that runs and gets our data, and then we're going to output our data to the console. So if we just, let's save it, and if we go to, let's go to debug mode. This simulates more thoroughly like what the website would be. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go into our tools. I'm going to go ahead and make this a small size. I'm going to go ahead and make that a smaller size, just so that we can see everything more easily when we scroll through. And if we go to our console, it's giving us an error. So the error is this because jQuery has not been set up. So let's go in, and you can just find jQuery and save it, and then you should be able to get our data. Let's see. It's a bad request. So let's go look at what we can do here. Top headlines, and then you can come down and you can see the documentation. So I think what we need is we need a keyword, or we need a category. So let's go ahead and put one of those in. We need something to query, so a country, or we need a category, or we need keyword, and I'll show you a few different things. So let's say our category is business. So let's go ahead and put that in. We'll say business category. Sorry, category is equal to business, and then we'll put our API key. And let's see if that gives us some results. Okay, so now we see that we brought back excuse me, we brought back JSON data. The total results, there are 2,805 results for business, and then you can see that it's giving us 20 actual articles. So there are only 20 articles that are being served to us. The status is okay, but the total results are 2,805, so we're only getting 20 out of 2,805. So if we click on this, then we can see all of the different articles that we have. And then for each article, you can see all of the data that's associated with it. So we have the author, we have the content. This is obviously in another language. We have the description, we have a title, and we have the URL and the URL to the image. So this is exactly what we need. It's also telling us the source. So this is from 24ur.com, which I'm not sure where that's from. I can't read the language. This one is Korean. This one is from Reuters. This is something in Spanish. And so you can see it's coming in different languages here. This is looks like Thai and Arabic. So this news API actually brings in news from sources all over the world. So if you want to set it up for a particular country, or you want to set it up for a particular language, you would do that through these different parameters. So you can see you could choose the different countries. I think you have to go to everything to be able to do the different languages as well. So let's get back to our working example. So we're bringing in all these articles with the category of business, and what we need to do is we need to start to parse out that data. So when we look at our data, we have our main object here. This is data, and it's bringing back all this other stuff. So we need to get into data.articles, and then we need to loop through each article and do something. So let's say data is going to be equal to data.articles, and then we can console log that, and just to make sure that we are we're getting into that object. Okay, so now we're at the level where we're just outside of all of our articles. Okay, so you can see here that we're just outside of them, and now we can loop through data, which is data.articles. We can loop through that, and then we can go and pick out each of these pieces of information here. So we set up a for each loop by saying $.each and parentheses, and then so for each data we're going to do something. So we're going to go through and we're going to loop through each of the articles inside of this variable. So we need an index and a value. So we can literally console log the value, and this should give us each of our articles whenever we log that. Okay, so now you can see we're no longer outside of the articles as an object. We get each article. Okay, so for each of these articles, so it's looping through this and pulling all this information out as a big object. So for each of these we need to pull out specific information. So what we want is we want the article image, so that's going to be equal to something, and we want the article summary, and that's also going to be equal to something, and then we want the article link, and that will also be equal to something. And the something that is going to be equal to is val, So value is this object, and then if we do dot notation, we can get into each of these particular key value pairs. So if we do val.description, that's going to give us the summary. If we do val.title, that'll give us the title, val.url, etc. The first one that we want is the URL to the image. So we want to be able to display the image into our application or website. So we want to do val.url to image. Is it all uppercase? Okay, that's camel cased. So you have to make sure that these are exactly what it says. So we're just going to console log that. I just want to make sure that we're getting everything that we want. So article summary is going to be equal to val.description, and then article link is going to be equal to val.url. And then we're just going to console log all that information out. So this is going to be article summary, and this is going to be article link. Alright, so now we should be pulling out the URL to the image, the description, and the URL for every single one of these. Remember, we're returning 20 of them by default, so there should be 20 instances where we have all that specific information. Okay, so you can see here we got all our data. So we have our image, we have our description, and then we have our the link to the story itself. Okay, image, description, link to the story, image, description, link to the story, etc., etc. It does it for every single one that we have. Now this one down here, it's pulling in a null, so there's going to be something down here that's there's no image or description. There's only a link. Okay, so just going to get an issue that we already know of. And now the next step, we don't need to log that anymore because we're getting all the information that we need. And then the next step is to, each time we want to get these values and we want to put them into this HTML. Okay. Now the easiest way for me to go through and get this HTML that we want to output each time it loops through the data is to just, for me, view the compiled HTML. If you're writing in HTML, you just want to copy that HTML. And so what we want to do is each time it loops through, we want to go into main and we want to append a new article, okay, with all of our values in it. So we go in with jQuery and we just say main append and then we have to put our HTML in there. So we'll do it like that. We're going to keep our classes. That's the advantage here, is you've already styled everything and built it out. So now all you have to do is add the data into it. So the data for me, I do last. All of the front end work, I make it look like I want it to look, and then I add the data in so that it just sort of flows naturally and freely. Our first instance is here with the image. So what we need to do is put single quotes. Let's just do double quotes. And there should be 4 double quotes. And then we need to put our our image, article image. That's the variable where we're holding the source URL for our article, for the image itself. Next we have this piece of text, and this piece of text is going to go in the article summary. And so let's just do quotes, single quotes this time. Oh yeah, well, we can do the single quotes, it'll work out in the end. Okay, so let's do article summary. The reason it's not going blue here is because of these spaces here, so we'll get rid of those and you'll see that it's right. And then the last thing that we need is the H reference for the URL. So we need the actual URL to the article. Okay. So we'll just copy that. We'll go in single quotes plus plus, and we'll put that there. Let's go ahead and change these to single quotes as well. It'll work out. So we need to get rid of these spaces and make sure that there's no space in between these. You can see that they're yellow and not all green. So let's get rid of that. You can see immediately that it turns it to blue as soon as we get rid of those extra spaces. So everything is blue, everything is green. That's exactly what we want. So what we're doing is each time we go through our piece of data, our article essentially, and you can see that it's already happening over to the right. So each time we loop through, we're getting these values and we're saving them as variables. So the link to the image, the description text, and then the URL to the article. And then for each time that we do that, we're going to go to main and we're going to append this article. And that article is going to fill in every time it does it. So there are 20 pieces of data return with this call. So 20 times it's going to go through and it's going to output this to main. And the first time it's going to go just like this. The second time it's going to append. So it's going to go to the very end of the content in main and it's going to put a new article. And then it's going to do that again 20 times. So let's get rid of our original. So all that we have is our main container. And you can see here that our article image, article summary, and article, you can look down at the bottom left there. You can see that that's an actual link that if we click on it, that it takes us to the actual news story. This is why I created Skimmer, so you don't have to deal with slow loading pages forever. But you can see that it just sort of goes through and it outputs all of our different pieces of data. Now if you want to change some of the calls, so we can change the calls here by going to the news API. And let's say we want to get everything, but everything based on another parameter. So let's say we want to get everything in French. How about that? So then we need to come in and we need to get our URL. So this is our URL for everything. And then if we want to get a language, it gives you some different parameters here to go through. So you can choose by domain. We're not going to do that. So let's get everything first. So instead of top headlines, we're going to say everything. And then not category of business, but we're going to say language equals French. Let's see if that pulls it up. It's not language. Is it language? Let's see if it's giving us an error in the console. Alright, so it's telling me it's a bad request. So the language equals French. Maybe we need to do a keyword here. So Q equals stocks. Okay. So you can see that everything is in French, and we just needed some sort of query or keyword. But we're bringing in articles that are in French that have the keyword stocks. Okay. It could be literally anything. It could be a French word. It could be a Japanese word. If you just wanted to do English, then you could do that, and it would bring in 20 articles that have to do with stocks. Okay. Or maybe it has to do with New York. So it's going to pull in all of these articles from lots of different sources that have the keyword New York. Okay. So there's lots of different things you can do, and you can work with to add inputs which make this a variable. So you put the input into a variable, and then your search changes based on what the user inputs or based on what you want to input. So there's lots of different things that you can do with this. You can do different languages. You can see that it's outputting the original language. So these are all the Japanese articles. They include New York somewhere in it. So there's lots of different ways that you can configure the news API, but essentially this is how it works from top to bottom. So you're making a call, you're getting back data, and then you roll through that data and get variables, and then you add those specific variables to your HTML here. You output them to the HTML, and then they're output to the page. So hopefully this is at least a good starter for you. I encourage you. It's called newsapi.org. If you want to just sort of bring in news into your website or into an application, this is a really good way to do it. If you are if you're selling things, then it gets pretty steep pretty fast. But if you have sort of a nonprofit or a website where you're not selling anything, it's not a commercial enterprise, then you get quite a bit of leeway, 1,000 requests per day, which has been more than enough for Skimmer. So and then they have a nice back end here where you can see your usage each day, and you can see how you're doing with the requests and stuff like that. So and you can change these different things. So it's a it's a really good API to use. It's free, and to get started or to go into development, you don't have to pay while you're developing the application. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I'm happy to get to them as quickly as I can. And hopefully this is helpful to you. There are a million APIs out there. They mostly all work the same as this. So this is the beauty of using APIs to get data, is that it's a sort of a standard form. And if you use, you can use JavaScript with this, like vanilla JavaScript. You can use jQuery. You can use multiple other languages, I'm sure, to go out and get calls like this, PHP or whatever. But this is the basic guts of being able to go out and work with the News API. And there are as many applications of bringing this into your website as you can think of, because the queries here are whatever you want, and you can set up multiple queries. You can set up multiple parameters to sort of filter the news that you want to get to. All right. Remember to give this a thumbs up if you liked it, and to subscribe to the channel. So I usually put out 1 or 2 videos a week, and every thumbs up, every share, every subscribe helps to get this information in front of more people and help more people, which is what I want to be about. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.